It was a week before Halloween, and I had just finished carving a particularly sinister-looking pumpkin. The wind outside was howling, and the full moon cast a glow over everything. I decided to take a walk through my quiet suburban neighborhood, which was known for its elaborate Halloween decorations. As I strolled down the dimly lit streets, I noticed something peculiar. One house at the end of the block had a front yard that was covered in a thick, unnatural fog. The fog seemed to seep out from the house itself, and it obscured any view of what was inside. A sign on the gate read, "Haunted House, enter if you dare." Being the adventurous type, I couldn't resist the allure of a spooky Halloween attraction. I cautiously pushed open the creaking gate and stepped into the fog. It was like entering another world. The fog was so thick that I could barely see my hand in front of my face. I stumbled through the fog, guided only by the eerie sounds that echoed around me. Ghostly moans, distant screams, and the occasional maniacal laughter filled the air. It was as if I had entered a nightmare. Suddenly, a cold hand touched my shoulder, sending shivers down my spine. I turned around to see a figure dressed in tattered rags and wearing a mask that resembled a decomposing corpse. They beckoned me to follow them deeper into the fog. With a mix of fear and curiosity, I followed the figure through a series of twists and turns. We passed through dark corridors and rooms filled with gruesome scenes. It was like being trapped in a horror movie. As we continued our journey, I couldn't help but wonder if this was all part of an elaborate Halloween prank. But the realism of the setting and the intensity of the experience made me doubt that. The line between reality and fantasy blurred as I ventured further into the unknown. Eventually, we reached a room that seemed to be the heart of the haunted house. In the center of the room was a coffin, and above it hung a chandelier with flickering candles. The figure pointed to the coffin and then slowly faded into the shadows. I approached the coffin cautiously and, with trembling hands, opened it. To my shock and horror, I found not a dummy or a prop, but a real, lifeless body. It was then that I realized I had stumbled upon something far more sinister than I had ever imagined. Panic set in as I desperately tried to find my way out of the haunted house. The fog seemed denser than ever, and the eerie sounds grew louder and more menacing. I couldn't tell if I was being pursued or if it was all in my mind. In the end, I managed to escape the fog-shrouded nightmare, but the memory of that Halloween night still haunts me to this day. I can't help but wonder if what I witnessed was a twisted reality or just an elaborate and horrifying Halloween prank. Either way, it was an experience I'll never forget, and it left me with a chilling question. What other horrors might be lurking in the shadows of our seemingly normal world? I should have been more cautious that night. The excitement of carving a pumpkin had gotten the best of me, and I didn't pay attention to the sharp knife in my hand. As I plunged the blade into the pumpkin's tough orange flesh, it slipped, and in an instant, I felt a searing pain in my hand. I dropped the knife and clutched my bleeding hand, a mixture of shock and fear coursing through me. The cut was deep, deeper than I had initially realized, and blood oozed from it. I rushed to the sink, running cold water over the wound to clean it. I hoped it was just a minor injury, but something about it felt different. The pain was sharp and intense, and I knew it wasn't a typical cut. Over the next few days, my hand began to change. The cut became inflamed, and the area around it turned a sickly shade of green. It throbbed with a constant pulsating pain, and my entire hand started to swell. I knew something was seriously wrong, but I was hesitant to seek medical attention. I thought it might heal on its own. However, the infection continued to spread. The skin around the wound became hot to the touch, and I developed a high fever. I could barely move my hand, which had now swollen to twice its normal size. It had become a grotesque and painful sight. Desperate and fearing for my life, I finally went to the emergency room. The doctors were alarmed by the condition of my hand and immediately admitted me for further examination. They began a series of tests and scans to determine the extent of the infection. After several tense days in the hospital, a specialist arrived at my bedside. She introduced herself as Dr. Margaret Landon, a researcher in infectious diseases. She had been called in to consult on my case due to the unusual nature of the infection. Dr. Landon examined my hand carefully, her face etched with concern. She explained that the infection was caused by a rare and highly aggressive bacteria, one she had encountered in her studies. This bacterium was known to produce toxins that could rapidly destroy tissue and even lead to amputation if not treated promptly and aggressively. I was terrified by the prognoses. Dr. Landon and her team worked tirelessly to devise a treatment plan. It involved a combination of powerful antibiotics and multiple surgeries to remove the infected tissue. The process was painful and grueling, but I had no choice if I wanted to save my hand and, potentially, my life. Days turned into weeks as I underwent treatment. The pain persisted, and there were moments when I doubted whether I would ever regain full use of my hand. But Dr. Landon's expertise and determination proved invaluable. Slowly but surely, the infection was brought under control, and my hand began to heal. It was a long and challenging road to recovery, but I emerged from the ordeal with my hand intact, albeit scarred and weakened. Dr. Landon's knowledge and dedication had saved me from a fate that seemed almost inevitable at the height of the infection. That Halloween night had taught me a painful lesson about the dangers of carelessness and the importance of seeking immediate medical attention when faced with a severe injury, and it had introduced me to the world of rare and dangerous bacteria. It was a night I would never forget, a night that had nearly cost me my hand, but had ultimately led me to a deeper appreciation for the fragility of life. I was hanging out with my friends at a spooky-themed party. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation as we all gathered around a bonfire, sharing scary stories and devouring candy. As the night grew darker, the host of the party, a guy named Mark, suggested we take a trip to the old abandoned mansion at the edge of town. Legend had it that the mansion was haunted and no one had dared to enter it for years. The idea was met with a mix of excitement and nervous laughter, and we decided to go for it. Armed with flashlights, we made our way through the dark woods, the trees casting eerie shadows under the glow of the moon. The mansion loomed in the distance, its broken windows and decrepit facade sending chills down our spines. As we entered the mansion, the air turned cold, and a sense of foreboding settled over us. Cobwebs covered the corners of the rooms, and the walls were adorned with faded, peeling wallpaper. It was as if time had frozen inside this forsaken place. We explored room after room, our flashlights revealing the mansion's dark secrets. In one room, we discovered old family portraits, their eyes seemingly following us as we moved. In another, we stumbled upon a dusty library filled with ancient, leather-bound books. Some of the titles were in languages we couldn't even recognize, but the creepiest discovery was yet to come. We entered what appeared to be a basement, and there, in the dim light of our flashlights, we saw a series of eerie paintings hanging on the walls. Each painting depicted a different Halloween night, with children dressed in costumes, but there was something unsettling about them. As we examined the paintings closer, we realized that the children in the paintings seemed to age from year to year, but they never aged physically. Their faces remained frozen in a perpetual state of childlike innocence, yet their eyes held a growing sense of fear and despair. Suddenly, the basement door slammed shut behind us, and we were plunged into darkness. Panic set in as we fumbled for our flashlights. When we finally managed to turn them on, we saw that the paintings had changed. The children's faces were contorted in agony, and their eyes were empty voids of darkness. We tried to open the door, but it was locked from the outside. The air grew colder, and we heard whispers and laughter that seemed to come from all around us. It was as if the very walls of the mansion were taunting us. In a desperate attempt to escape, we began tearing the paintings off the walls. As we did, the whispers grew louder, and the temperature dropped to bone-chilling levels. Finally, with one last painting removed, the door creaked open, and we bolted out of the mansion, never looking back. To this day, I can't explain what happened in that old mansion on Halloween night. All I know is that it was a night filled with unexplainable horrors and an unsettling feeling that something otherworldly had been lurking in the shadows. It's a Halloween I'll never forget, and a reminder that some mysteries are better left unsolved.